Now, I was hoping maybe you could end the show today instead of with score predictions. You were the second person ever to wave the flag, and you waving the flag is what started the streak that still lives on today. So I was hoping maybe you could just briefly tell us about what that experience was like, what it means to you, and just how it feels to know that you're the one that started this streak.
Well, it's a cool little piece of Washington State history to be a part of that, where in 2003 I was a student in Minneapolis, and I was a big messages board guy on kookfan.com, and there was somebody who went from like Albuquerque to Austin to fly the Cougar flag. And I remember hearing that at the time, like thinking like that would be just a really cool thing to do. Like I want to do that. And the next weekend, I went to a Michigan Minnesota game in Minneapolis. And after the game, I wore my Cougar stuff to the game, and leaving the game, there was like a live television camera that was on, and I went up behind it and I jumped on, behind the reporter and yelled "Go Cougs!" And then I told everybody that I did that, and that kind of got a hit. And then someone was like, "How Cougar are you? This guy went and flew the flag on ESPN GameDay. Like this guy, crashed a live broadcast and said "Go Cougs!" Like, what are we gonna do next week? And then the idea started to go like, well, we should send the flag to GameDay, just this next week, and say that we want them to come to Pullman, because that was something that Tom Pounds, the founder, had a sign that said, if GameDay won't come to Pullman, we'll come to GameDay. And I did that, and
yeah, did he mail you the flag or something?
He did. So they announced it. Then it was going to be at Madison, and I was closest of the people on this message board. There's maybe 100 people there, and I just happened to be 250 miles away or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, people were like, hey, let's send Brent. And so even though that's not my internet screen name, and they basically said hey, why don't you go? And I was like, sure, if you guys give me gas money and put me up in a hotel, I'll do it. So people sent me checks for money for gas in a hotel, and Tom Pounds sent me this flag with this list of instructions of how to get on TV. And my thinking at the time was, I'll just show up and there'll probably be a screen where they're broadcasting the event like they had there.
Right.
And I'll look on the cameras on the screen, I'll figure out where I am, and I'll just find a place where I'm on there. So I'm thinking this is going to be no big deal. But Tom Pounds is an electrical engineer by trade, I think.
Yeah.
I know he's an engineer.
Right.
I'm guessing on the electrical. He's now a science teacher, but so engineers love their details and blueprints. So I got 3 pages of documents of this is where the camera angle is, and this is where you want to stand, and then people are sending me money to go get this on there, so I'm feeling a lot of pressure to get on this thing. And I'm like, what are these fans going to think of me? So, because this hadn't been done before.
Right.
And so I got there half hour, 45 minutes early, not even knowing where it was going to be broadcasting from in Madison, because I had never been to Camp Randall. It was just right outside the stadium in this big field, and there were maybe 50 to 100 people there when I got there. It's very different than when it was in Pullman. There was
yes.
5,000 people there an hour beforehand. But yeah, a few college students were kind of there, and it wasn't that big of a deal, so I think I got a pretty good vantage point. And then other fans started to come in, and Wisconsin fans are a rowdy bunch.
Mm-hmm.
So they were throwing bottles at Purdue fans because they were playing Purdue. ESPN gave out hard hats because it's built by the Home Depot.
Right.
So I saw some of those.
Saw those on Saturday as well.
And so they were throwing those at Purdue fans. I had a few bottles thrown at my flag because it wasn't a Wisconsin flag, and they're showing their pride and all that. But for the most part, because Wisconsin's colors are red and white, and that's largely what I was wearing.
Pretty close to crimson, yeah.
Yeah, especially the crimson that the university was using at the time. I blended in and got it. didn't get the ire of a lot of these people. But I'll remember it was only like an hour and a half broadcast or something like that at the time. It really wasn't very long. They've expanded the show since. But then the personalities were walking to the game to do the broadcast. And I was like, I'm going to see if I can get this flag signed by like Corso and Herb Street, and Chris Fowler was the other guy at the time. Mm-hmm. Fowler kind of went off and did his own thing, but I gave the flag to Lee Corso, and I was like, hey, we're a group of Washington State fans. We're trying to get game day to come to Pullman. Corso didn't say a word to me. He just like signed my flag and then went on.
Oh.
But Herb Street was a really cool guy. He's like, oh, I think that's a great idea. And that was week one. You know, it was just this really weird, unheard of thing. Drove back home, watched or listened on the internet, radio, audio, streaming. Washington State beat Stanford, and then we mailed it off, and it just it went from there. People formed a nonprofit the week between week 1 and week 2 of the streak, and people started donating to that, and it paid to ship the flag around. But as coincidence will have it, kind of the dovetail of this story, year 2, it came back to Madison, and so I was able to fly the flag a second time.
Oh, cool.
And just get a sense of how quickly it took off. Wisconsin fans year 2 were really super understanding of like, hey, we want to get you on TV because there's a Coug flag on here every week. People had started to pick up on that, and I kind of got to explain the story. And also, I think the behavior of the Wisconsin fans the year before led to no flagpoles the second time around, and no hard hats were given out to anybody. So I think sort of the raucous behavior, game day I was like, nope, no more of that. And but all the personalities, because I got Fowler, Corso, and Herb Street to sign the flag the second time around, and do autographs, and they're like, oh, we think what you're doing is great. So it really started to take root within the consciousness of like the heavy inside game day people with a year. It didn't take off with the Cougar Nation until later, but it was just kind of exciting to see that. And then in 2010, Moose had a bunch of the flag wavers lead the team out on the field against Montana State. And I also got to do it for the Apple Cup that year. So for someone whose bucket list was like, I want to lead the Cougars out onto the field for a football game, to be able to do that was incredibly just surreal. Because it's for as a guy who graduated high school at like 6'3", 175, and those starving kids in Africa that you see on TV where it's like, can you spare $1? Like, I started getting money from them so I would be able to eat. It's like, wow, I got to lead a football team out onto the field. So, no chance to play D1 college football, but was able to do that. And, it's just, for game day to come to Pullman, and to feel like I had a little small part of that, it's pretty awesome to see how far it's come, where it's a fixture of the show now. And other schools are copying something that we did with a message board. Clemson's doing it, UCF's doing it now, but we did it first. And that's a pretty unique thing to do. So it's really exciting. I don't know if you ever get those like crazy fantasies about when you do something, like maybe this will catch on and it'll go big.
Right.
And like for as crazy as those thoughts were when I was driving there, thinking about it in the early times of this, it's exceeded all of that. So,
well, Brent, thank you for sharing that story. I really appreciate it. I mean, obviously the hard work that you and the other flag wavers have done fully paid off. College game day this last weekend was absolutely incredible. I had never known the details of that story, even after knowing you for so many years. So I appreciate hearing it. I know the listeners will appreciate hearing it. And I just have to say thank you for being the one to really start that tradition.